Welcome back to Occult Archives, where we like to take these deep dives into, history's most feared books.
Yeah,
Uh,
the books that people are like, oh, no, don't read that.
Yeah, you'll be cursed or something.
Exactly, yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about the Comte de Gabalis, the elemental world, and the secret doctrine of the Adepts.
Okay.
And, right off the bat, the title alone just conjures up all these images of, secret societies and
Right, hidden knowledge.
hidden knowledge, right?
It was published in 1670 in Paris
Okay.
by an abbé de Montfaucon de Villars.
So we're talking about a book from the 17th century.
Yeah.
Wow.
And even the quote on the title page,
Right.
it's like a little warning label.
Yeah.
It's from Tertullian,
Okay.
and it says, when a thing is hidden away with so much pains, merely to reveal it is to destroy it.
So you're talking about a 17th century warning label.
Yeah.
Wow. What does that suggest to you about the contents of the book, or like what were they going for with that?
Well, I think it suggests that the power of some ideas lies in their obscurity,
Okay.
like in the process of seeking them out,
Right.
and maybe even coming to understand them.
Okay, so like the act of just understanding or revealing them
Yeah, just to lay them bare,
would destroy the power.
actually diminish the impact,
Okay.
and maybe lead to them being misinterpreted.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive into the Comte de Gabalis, our mission is to, I guess, really try to understand and unpack the core arguments in the book,
Right.
especially when it comes to this concept of elemental peoples.
Yeah.
We've got, we've got Sylphs of the air, we've got Gnomes of the earth,
Right.
Nymphs of the water, and Salamanders of fire.
Okay.
And then also this idea of a secret doctrine of the sages.
Yeah, so we're not here to necessarily say this is all true or it's all false,
Right.
but rather to understand what the book is proposing.
Yeah, exactly. What is this intellectual landscape that allows for these ideas to like really take root?
Right. What were the assumptions? What kind of worldview made this possible?
Yeah, let's try to dig into that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
okay, right off the bat, the book starts with the Comte de Gabalis himself.
Right.
And the Abbé de Villars, who's kind of telling us this story.
Right.
He starts by talking about the Comte's rather sudden death.
Right. From apoplexy.
Yeah, from apoplexy.
Yeah.
Which I had to look up.
Yeah. It's basically a stroke.
Yeah, stroke. And you can almost hear the knowing tone in the Abbé's voice when he mentions how all the amateurs
Right.
will no doubt blame this on his involvement with the occult.
Right. This is what happens when you delve into these mysteries.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they'll say.
It's a very dramatic opening.
It is, yeah.
It's almost like the book itself is kind of hinting at the risks of,
Yeah.
having this knowledge.
Right. There's a sense of danger there.
Yeah.
But then the Abbé quickly defends the Comte.
Right.
He says that, he was very discreet, and he had this deep respect for what he calls the religion of his fathers, the philosophers.
So this was something that was taken very seriously.
Yeah, it paints a picture of someone who, wasn't just dabbling in this.
Right.
This was a serious pursuit for him.
Right. And he wasn't just going to share it with anybody.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Definitely not the unworthy.
Right.
So this selectivity almost makes these ideas seem even more valuable.
Right. It's like if they're this closely guarded,
Right.
they must be important,
Yeah.
at least in the Comte's view.
Yeah.
So it adds to the mystique.
Yeah. So what do we make of the Comte himself then?
Well, he's portrayed as this judicious figure,
Okay.
but also prone to vision.
Visions, right?
Yeah, so it creates this interesting duality.
Okay.
Is he a rational philosopher exploring esoteric ideas?
Right.
Or is he someone whose inner world maybe blurs the lines with reality a little bit?
Yeah, so he's got this very intellectual side,
Right.
but then also this kind of visionary side.
Exactly.
Okay. So I guess let's get into like the core of the book then.
Okay.
This idea of elemental peoples.
Right.
The Comte just comes right out and says that, the elements are not empty.
Yeah.
They're teeming with perfect beings.
Right.
And he even suggests that humanity's connection to these beings was severed
Yeah.
after the biblical fall of Adam.
Right. So that's a foundational claim.
Yeah.
That sets the stage for everything else.
Yeah. So what does this tell us about like his understanding of the natural world?
Well, it suggests a world that's much more alive and interconnected than maybe the prevailing scientific views of the time allowed for.
Right.
It's a world that's populated by intelligences beyond our everyday perception.
Okay. So what kinds of beings are we talking about here?
Well, he described these different elemental types.
Okay.
Let's start with the Sylphs,
The Sylphs.
the beings of the air.
Okay.
They're described as having human faces,
Okay.
and they appear haughty, but they're actually quite tractable.
Tractable.
Yeah, meaning they're willing to be led or guided.
Okay.
They're lovers of science.
Okay.
They're cunning. They're helpful to the sages.
Okay.
But they're not big fans of fools.
Not big fans of fools. So they sound kind of like intellectuals.
They do, yeah, a little bit aloof.
Aloof.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about their looks?
Well, their women are said to possess a masculine beauty like that of the Amazons.
Okay, so they've got this kind of specific aesthetic.
They do, yeah.
Okay, what about the gnomes?
The gnomes inhabit the earth,
Okay.
and they're primarily guardians of treasures.
Guardians of treasures.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a ton of detail there.
Right.
But it aligns with a lot of traditional folklore.
Yeah.
So he's drawing on those existing mythological frameworks
Okay.
and kind of integrating them into his own system.
Okay, what about the nymphs?
The nymphs are associated with water,
Okay.
and he simply says that they come in crowds to the shores.
To shores.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it implies that if you know what you're looking for, you might be able to see them.
Okay, and finally the salamanders.
Right, the salamanders of fire.
Okay.
Interestingly, he links them to a prayer.
A prayer.
Yeah, recorded by Porphyry
Okay.
in the Temple of Delphi.
Okay.
And he emphasizes its sublime theology,
Okay.
talking about the immortal, eternal Father of all things.
So he's connecting them to a very spiritual principle?
Yeah, he's elevating them beyond just, fiery entities.
Right.
And suggesting this connection to profound spiritual principles.
So is he trying to, validate these claims through ancient religious texts?
I think he's trying to root his ideas in those established traditions
Okay.
to show that these concepts aren't entirely new
Okay.
or heretical,
Right.
but that they have echoes in respected ancient wisdom.
Okay. So how would somebody actually go about encountering these elemental peoples?
Right.
What does he propose?
Well, he lays out a pretty specific method.
Okay.
You purify the elements.
Okay, so air, water, earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you expose them to the sun.
Expose them to the sun.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you take small quantities of these purified elements daily.
Daily.
Yeah, for several months.
Okay, so it's like a recipe.
It does have a very almost quasi-scientific feel to it.
Yeah.
Right?
And then what happens?
Well, the promised results are pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
You'll see the Sylphs flying Commonwealth,
Okay.
nymphs on the shores, and gnomes parading their riches.
Wow.
So it's a very direct, almost experimental approach,
Okay.
obviously within his own understanding of natural philosophy,
Right.
but it's very hands-on.
Yeah, and what's interesting is he says that you can do all this without symbols, without ceremonies, without barbaric words.
Right, none of the usual occult trappings.
Yeah, so it's not like the magic that we see in the movies.
No.
It's something different.
Right.
Okay. And what's the goal of all this?
The goal is to become a ruler over these elemental peoples.
The ruler.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they supposedly recognize the sage's superiority without requiring any kind of worship.
So there's this kind of hierarchy then.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
The sage, through this process of purification and understanding,
Okay.
attains a natural authority over them.
Okay, so it's not about conjuring them up through magic.
Oh,
It's about being on a higher level than them.
exactly, yeah. A recognition of inherent wisdom.
Okay.
And maybe a kind of evolved human state.
Okay. And then we get into this concept of an alliance between the sages and the elemental peoples.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, he talks about a holy medicine
Right.
that strengthens the eyes.
Right. Which enables you to perceive these.
To perceive these beings.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the commentary links this to pineal gland regeneration.
Right. So it's like unlocking a hidden faculty within us.
Okay,
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
And apparently the philosophers of old were concerned with the unhappiness of the elementals.
Right.
And he says that God revealed a remedy for this.
Yeah.
And that remedy is this alliance. So are the elementals themselves seeking something from this?
It seems that way.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
seeking some kind of spiritual advancement
Okay.
through connection with the sages.
Okay, so it's not just a one-way street.
No, it's a reciprocal relationship.
Okay. What do the sages get out of this?
They gain knowledge and perhaps even influence over the elementals,
Okay.
while the elementals get a pathway to participate more fully in the divine order,
Okay.
much like humanity's own spiritual aspirations.
Okay, but then he talks about this idea of chastity.
Right.
So how does this alliance, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
he talks about a mystical marriage
Right.
between a true philosopher and the people of the elements.
So what does that mean exactly?
Now, that's a very enigmatic concept.
It is, yeah. He doesn't explicitly define it,
Right.
but we can infer that it suggests a union on a more spiritual or energetic level
Okay.
rather than a conventional physical marriage.
So it's not a literal marriage. It's
Right.
more like
A deep alignment.
a deep alignment.
Yeah, of energies and intentions
Okay.
between the sage and the elemental being.
Okay. And he also says that the sages don't face any risk to their own eternity through this alliance.
Right.
And if they're predestined, they can even grant immortality to their elemental partner.
Wow.
But if not, marriage with a sylphid makes their soul mortal
Okay.
and frees them from the second death.
So that's an interesting proposition.
It is,
It's
yeah.
almost like the elementals have a role in human salvation in a way.
Yeah, so he's proposing some very unusual theological ideas here.
He is, yeah.
And to kind of illustrate these ideas,
Right.
he gives a bunch of examples and anecdotes.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of out there.
A little colorful.
Yeah, he goes all the way back to Noah
No.
and the repopulation of the earth,
Okay.
suggesting that alliances with elementals played a role.
Oh.
He mentions Noah's wife and the salamander Oromassus, and his sons with other elemental princes. And then this leads to his explanation for the horrible complexion of the Ethiopians
Oh, wow.
due to Ham's disobedience.
Yeah, so we need to remember the historical context here and
Yeah.
the prevailing biases of the 17th century.
Yeah.
These claims reflect some outdated and frankly unacceptable ideas by modern standards.
Right. We have to understand that this was a different time.
Absolutely.
Okay. He also recounts a tale about a gnome beloved by Magdalene of the Cross,
Okay.
an abbess in Spain,
Okay.
and how an ignorant confessor demonized this whole relationship.
Right, so the Comte is clearly on the side of it being an elemental being
Right.
and not a demon.
Yeah, so this anecdote is really supporting his central argument.
Exactly. It shows his belief that a lot of phenomena attributed to demons
Right.
are actually just interactions with these elemental peoples that are
Yeah.
being misinterpreted because people lack knowledge about their true nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we get into the story of Gertrude, a nun of Cologne. And these love letters that were supposedly written while she was possessed,
Okay.
the Comte obviously contrasts this with the usual demonic explanation.
Right.
And he kind of suggests that the devil has better things to do
Yeah.
than write love letters to nuns.
He's got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right.
So he's bringing in a little bit of, I guess, common sense to these supernatural claims.
Right. It's his way of offering a more rational explanation
Right.
within his own esoteric framework.
Yeah.
Basically saying that not every unusual event has to be the work of demons.
Okay. And then he goes on to attribute the parentage of several historical figures to elementals.
Right.
He says Romulus, the founder of Rome, was a salamander.
Wow.
Servius Tullius was also a salamander.
Hard.
And then even Hercules and Alexander the Great were sylphs.
Wow. He's really going for it here.
Yeah, that's a pretty big claim.
It is.
What's he trying to do with all this?
Well, I think he's trying to elevate the status of these elemental people by linking them to these foundational figures in Western history and mythology. So
Okay.
he's blurring the lines between the human and the elemental realms.
Okay. And he even brings up Melchizedek,
Right.
saying that his father was a sylph
Okay.
and that his form of worship was connected to this elemental understanding.
Okay.
And then he also mentions some more recent accounts from Spain,
Okay.
including a sylphid who lived with a Spaniard, had children, and then died,
Okay.
which raises this question of, should we automatically think of these beings as devils?
Mm-hmm.
Are they necessarily evil?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so he's using these more recent examples to kind of provide more contemporary evidence for his claims.
Yeah, he's trying to show that these interactions aren't just relegated to ancient myths,
Right.
but that they're ongoing.
Yeah.
They're happening in the real world.
Okay. And then there's this story about the young lord of Bavaria
Oh, yeah.
and the sylphid
Yeah.
who took the form of his deceased wife.
Right, to comfort him. That's a really poignant story.
Yeah, they had this whole life together.
They did.
They had children,
Yeah.
but then eventually she disappeared because of his impious behavior.
Right, so it's almost like a moral lesson.
Yeah, there's this kind of delicate balance
Yeah.
that's required in these alliances.
You have to be respectful
Right.
and adhere to certain principles.
Okay. So moving on, he also talks about the Sabbath,
Oh, the Sabbath.
which we usually associate with, witches and demonic gatherings.
Right.
But he completely dismisses those descriptions as imbecilities.
Yeah, he's not having it.
So what's his take on the Sabbath?
Well, according to the Comte, it's not a meeting of devil worshippers,
Okay.
but an assembly of sages.
Of sages.
Yeah,
Okay.
who gather the inhabitants of the elements to share wisdom and ethical teachings.
Okay, so it's like a philosophical or spiritual instruction session.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a complete inversion of the traditional understanding.
Right. And he describes these, joyous occasions where like a gnome might renounce error
Right.
and achieve immortality.
Okay.
And then there's a marriage with the sage's daughter
Okay.
and these grand celebrations.
So he's taking something sinister
Yeah.
and completely recasting it as something enlightened.
Yeah.
Right.
And he even mentions historical figures like Zedekias,
Okay.
who tried to explain the reality of elemental peoples and were just met with disbelief.
Right.
So he's drawing a parallel to his own challenges.
Exactly. Yeah. People didn't believe them then, and they don't believe me now.
Yeah. Okay. Then he connects all this back to ancient wisdom and philosophy.
Right.
He talks about Paracelsus and his claims of sages fasting for long periods.
Right. Living on solar quintessence. Yeah.
And he says that the sages only eat when they please
Okay.
because of this Catholic Kabbalistic medicine that liberates them from necessity.
So they've reached this advanced level of spiritual and physical mastery.
Yeah. Okay. He also brings up the Sylphs and their prophecies,
Right.
including Sambeth, who was believed to be Noah's daughter.
Okay.
And he mentions the marriage of David and the Sibyl to emphasize the acceptance of these figures in religious traditions.
Right. So he's saying, look, if we can accept these ancient prophets and oracles,
Right.
then this idea of beings with extraordinary knowledge or connections isn't so far-fetched.
Right, so he's trying to build a historical precedent.
Exactly.
Okay. And then he gets into oracles,
Okay.
especially the ones reported by Porphyry,
Right.
highlighting their pronouncements on God.
Right.
And he basically says that these insights couldn't have come from the devil.
Right, because the devil wouldn't promote the concept of a single, supreme, and eternal God.
Right.
So it's a pretty direct challenge to the typical demonic explanations for these ancient spiritual phenomena.
Yeah, he's saying that's not how the devil works.
Exactly.
And he even rejects this idea of the exhalation theory
Right.
or oracular phenomena.
Yeah.
He talks about the Temple of Hercules in Armenia,
Right.
where the physical evidence didn't seem to support a purely naturalistic explanation.
Right.
And he also briefly touches on Aristotle's and Plutarch's views on the cessation of oracles.
So he's showing that even in the ancient world,
Right.
these were topics of debate.
Yeah. So he's really positioning his ideas within this long history
Exactly.
of philosophical and religious inquiry.
He's saying this isn't just me making this up. This goes way back.
Yeah, he's trying to create this more coherent and accurate understanding of these mysteries.
Right.
Okay, so we've gone through all these extraordinary claims.
We have.
What's the deeper meaning of all this?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Like, how can we interpret this idea of elemental peoples and their alliance with sages
Right.
beyond just the literal claims?
Well, one way to think about it is that maybe these elemental peoples aren't literal beings,
Okay.
but symbolic representations of different aspects of nature. Or maybe inner psychological states.
Yeah.
Or even forces that weren't understood by science in the 17th century.
Okay.
So think of them as personifications of the fundamental energies and elements of the world,
Okay, so not literal beings,
but more like archetypes or principles.
Okay, and what about this idea of an alliance with them?
Well, maybe that symbolizes a more harmonious relationship with these natural forces.
Okay.
A deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things.
Okay.
So the alliance could be a metaphor for achieving a state of balance and integration
Okay.
within ourselves and with the natural world.
Right.
Recognizing these vital energies that animate everything.
Yeah.
The commentary's mention of solar force as a key energy seems really relevant in this context.
Yeah, and we have to remember the historical context.
Right.
Back then, the lines between science and philosophy and the occult were much more blurred.
Much more blurred. Yeah.
So it's very possible that a lot of his assertions were meant to be understood allegorically.
Right, or symbolically.
Yeah.
The language and the conceptual frameworks were just different back then.
Yeah, what we might see as a literal claim today
Right.
could have had a more nuanced symbolic meaning to his contemporaries.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess to wrap this up, the Comte de Gabalis is a book that really sticks with you.
It does, yeah.
It's easy to just dismiss it as fantasy.
Right.
But when you really look at the system of thought that it presents,
Yeah.
you can see that he's trying to grapple with some really profound questions
Absolutely.
about the nature of reality and our place within it.
Yeah, he's asking big questions.
Yeah.
About existence, about the universe,
Yeah.
about our connection to it all.
So we've explored his ideas about elemental peoples.
Right.
This potential for interacting with them.
Yeah.
Through sages.
Through these individuals who have attained a certain level of wisdom.
Right. His reinterpretation of the Sabbath.
Right.
And these connections that he draws to ancient wisdom.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
Even if unconventional.
Yeah. So it kind of leaves us with this question.
It does.
Are there deeper truths embedded within these ideas that still resonate with us today?
Yeah, like how do these ideas connect with our modern understanding of consciousness, of energy, of our relationship to the natural world?
Yeah, why do these myths and legends persist across cultures and time?
That's the question I would leave you with.
Yeah.
Why do these stories keep popping up?
Yeah.
Maybe by looking beyond the literal and exploring the why behind these narratives.
Yeah.
We can get a better understanding of our own search for meaning.
Okay.
And our ongoing exploration of these mysteries of existence.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for illuminating this deep dive into the Comte de Gabalis.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, if you're feeling adventurous, maybe seek out this book for yourself.
Right.
You might be surprised by what you find.
You never know.
Okay.